Today, we're uncovering a truth that might completely change the way you look at something sitting quietly in your kitchen cupboard: tinned chopped tomatoes. Right now, there's a good chance you have two, maybe three tins sitting on your shelf. Why wouldn't you? It's one of the most basic ingredients in British cooking. A few tomatoes, a bit of juice sealed in a tin. Simple, cheap, harmless. Or at least, that's what we've all been led to believe. But once you start looking closer, the story behind those tins becomes far more disturbing than most shoppers ever imagine. Because the reality is, a standard tin of chopped tomatoes in the UK is not required to be 100% tomatoes. Not even close. Under UK food law, a tin labeled chopped tomatoes only has to contain 60% actual tomato. That means up to 40% of what you're buying can legally be something else, nearly half the tin. And many of the biggest brands in the country operate right at that legal minimum. You're paying for tomatoes, while a large portion of the product isn't tomatoes at all. And most people never even realize it. But it doesn't stop there. Take a look at the ingredients list on many tins and you'll see something called citric acid listed as an acidity regulator. It sounds natural. It sounds like it comes from lemons or limes. But the citric acid used in industrial food production is typically created through fermentation using a black mold called Aspergillus niger grown on sugar. That's what's adjusting the acidity of the tomato sauce you're serving your family. And the reason it's added isn't for your benefit. It's often used to stabilize a cheap watery product and cover up a thin, flat flavor. Then there's the tin itself. Most chopped tomato tins are coated with a plastic inner lining designed to stop acidic tomato juice from corroding the metal. But historically, many of those linings have contained bisphenol A BPA, a chemical linked to hormone disruption that can leach into food. Tomatoes are highly acidic, which means the risk of that leaching is even higher. The European Union banned BPA in food contact materials in December 2024, but the United Kingdom has not yet implemented the same ban. So today, some tins still sitting on supermarket shelves may contain that lining. And then comes the investigation that truly shook the industry. In December 2024, a BBC Panorama investigation tested 64 tomato products sold across the UK, Germany, and the United States. What they discovered raised serious questions. Some products labeled as Italian tomatoes were allegedly found to contain tomatoes originating from Xinjiang, China, a region where international organizations have documented the use of forced labor. Workers describe picking hundreds of kilograms of tomatoes daily under extremely harsh conditions. And here's the part that matters most for British shoppers. 17 UK supermarket products were named in that investigation. 17 products many people have likely bought dozens of times. Brands customers trust. Brands that appear in kitchens across the country every single day. So today, we're going to walk through 9 chopped tomato products sold in UK supermarkets that you need to know about. And after that, we'll reveal 5 brands that are actually worth buying. But before we go any further, I want you to think about something. If the information you've heard in the last minute already surprised you, imagine what most people still don't know. Families buy these tins every week. Kids eat meals made from them. And the companies behind these products are counting on one thing above all else: silence. So, if you believe people deserve to know what's really in their food, the most powerful thing you can do right now is support the spread of this information. Hit the like button, share the video, because every interaction pushes this information in front of more families who deserve transparency. Now, let's start with number 9 on the list. Number 9, Sainsbury's chopped tomatoes. Starting our list at number 9 is a product found in millions of British kitchens: Sainsbury's chopped tomatoes. Sainsbury's is one of the largest supermarket chains in the United Kingdom, with more than 1,000 stores across the country. For many shoppers, the store's own brand products represent good value, reliable quality at a lower price. But when it comes to tinned tomatoes, value sometimes comes with compromises most people never see. Like many supermarket own brand tomato tins, Sainsbury's chopped tomatoes are produced through large international supply chains. Tomatoes may be grown, processed, and packaged across multiple countries before the final product reaches UK shelves. That alone isn't unusual in the food industry, but it does make transparency more complicated, because once supply chains stretch across borders, tracking exactly where every tomato originated becomes far more difficult. This issue came into the spotlight during the BBC Panorama investigation released in December 2024. Researchers examined dozens of tomato products sold across the UK, Europe, and the United States, looking at where the tomatoes might actually be coming from. Some products marketed as Italian tomatoes were alleged to contain tomatoes sourced from Xinjiang, China, a region where human rights organizations have raised serious concerns about labor practices in agricultural industries. Now, it's important to be clear, not every tin of tomatoes is connected to those allegations, and companies have stated that they maintain strict supplier standards. But investigations like this reveal how complex and opaque global food supply chains can be. For shoppers standing in the supermarket aisle, a simple label saying Italian style or packed in Italy may not tell the whole story about where the tomatoes were actually grown. And that uncertainty has raised new questions among consumers about sourcing, labeling, and accountability in the tinned tomato market. For many people, Sainsbury's chopped tomatoes remain a convenient and affordable staple. But the next product on this list highlights another issue that affects nearly every tin of tomatoes on the shelf: the ingredients that go beyond tomatoes themselves. Number 8, Tesco chopped tomatoes. Next on the list is another name almost every UK shopper recognizes instantly: Tesco. As the largest supermarket chain in the United Kingdom, Tesco sells millions of tins of chopped tomatoes every single year. Their own brand tomato products are among the most widely purchased in the country, often chosen because they're affordable and easy to find. But affordability sometimes comes with a detail many shoppers overlook. Remember the rule mentioned earlier under UK regulations: a tin labeled chopped tomatoes only needs to contain 60% actual tomato. That means up to 40% of the contents can legally be something else. In many cases, that something else is tomato juice, water stabilizers, or acidity regulators designed to maintain shelf life and control flavor. One of the most common ingredients added is citric acid. On the surface, it sounds harmless. After all, citrus fruits naturally contain citric acid, but the version used in mass food production is typically manufactured through industrial fermentation processes. It's used to control acidity levels and stabilize flavor in large-scale canned food production. For manufacturers, this process helps create a consistent product even when the quality of the tomatoes themselves varies from batch to batch. For consumers, however, it means the contents of the tin may be far more processed than the simple label suggests. There's also the matter of the tin itself. Because tomatoes are naturally acidic, canned tomato products require protective linings inside the metal container to prevent corrosion. Historically, many of these linings have contained bisphenol A, or BPA, a chemical that has been studied for its potential effects on the human endocrine system. Although many manufacturers have begun transitioning to BPA-free alternatives, the issue has remained a topic of debate within the food packaging industry. And since tomatoes are among the most acidic foods commonly canned, they are also among the foods most likely to interact with the lining of the container. For millions of Tesco customers, these tins are simply a quick ingredient for pasta sauce or soup. But the deeper you look into the details behind canned tomatoes, the more complicated the story becomes. And the next brand on our list shows just how global the tinned tomato industry really is. Number 7, Asda chopped tomatoes. Coming in at number 7 is another familiar supermarket staple: Asda chopped tomatoes. Asda is one of the UK's largest supermarket chains, known for its competitive prices and wide selection of own brand grocery items. For many shoppers trying to stretch their food budget, Asda's basic range of canned goods can seem like an easy choice. But when it comes to tinned tomatoes, the real story often lies behind the label. Like other supermarket own brand products, Asda chopped tomatoes are sourced through complex international supply networks. Tomatoes may be grown in one country, processed in another, and packaged somewhere else entirely before finally arriving in British supermarkets. For consumers, that makes it difficult to know exactly where the ingredients originated. And that uncertainty became a major talking point after the BBC Panorama investigation released in December 2024. The investigation examined dozens of tomato products sold across multiple countries, analyzing their supply chains and potential links to tomato production in regions where labor conditions have been widely criticized. In particular, the report raised concerns about tomatoes allegedly linked to the Xinjiang region of China, where international organizations have documented reports of forced labor within agricultural industries. Now, again, it's important to emphasize that not every product on supermarket shelves is connected to those allegations. Companies often rely on multiple suppliers, and they frequently state that they conduct audits and require their partners to meet ethical sourcing standards. But investigations like this highlight a reality that many consumers rarely consider. The journey from farm to supermarket shelf can involve numerous intermediaries, processors, and distributors across several continents. By the time a tin of chopped tomatoes reaches a British kitchen, the path it traveled may be far more complicated than the label suggests. And as shoppers become more aware of these global supply chains, many are beginning to ask a simple question: where exactly did the tomatoes in this tin come from? The next brand on our list brings us even closer to the heart of the European tomato industry. Number 6, Morrison's chopped tomatoes. At number 6, we have another major supermarket name that millions of British shoppers visit every week: Morrison's. Known for its focus on fresh food and competitive prices, Morrison's has built a reputation as a traditional British grocer. Its own brand products, including canned vegetables and tomatoes, are widely stocked across the country. But when it comes to tinned tomatoes, Morrison's products face the same industry realities, affecting nearly every supermarket brand. Large-scale tomato production is now a global operation. Many tomatoes used in canned products across Europe come from large agricultural regions in countries such as Italy, Spain, Portugal, and increasingly parts of Asia. The reason is simple: mass production keeps costs low. Tomatoes can be grown harvested in huge quantities and processed into canned products that are shipped around the world. But that scale also creates supply chains that are extremely complex. During the BBC Panorama investigation released in December 2024, researchers examined dozens of tomato products sold across multiple countries. Their investigation looked at whether some products marketed as Italian tomatoes could be linked to tomatoes originating from Xinjiang, China. This region has been at the center of international criticism regarding alleged forced labor within certain agricultural industries. Workers interviewed during the investigation described extremely demanding labor conditions while harvesting tomatoes for large-scale processing operations. Again, companies involved in the canned tomato market have repeatedly stated that they require suppliers to meet ethical sourcing standards and that they conduct checks throughout their supply chains. However, the investigation raised questions about how difficult it can be to track the full origin of agricultural products when they pass through multiple processors and exporters before reaching the final packaging stage. For many shoppers, a tin of chopped tomatoes is simply an ingredient for pasta sauce, chili, or soup. But behind that small metal tin lies a supply chain that may stretch across several continents. And the next product on our list is one that many people associate with premium Italian quality. Number 5, Napolina chopped tomatoes. Now, we arrive at a brand that many shoppers associate with authentic Italian cooking: Napolina. With its Italian flag colors and Mediterranean branding, Napolina has long marketed itself as a source of traditional Italian ingredients, from pasta to olive oil to tinned tomatoes. For many British households, Napolina chopped tomatoes are seen as a step up from basic supermarket brands. The packaging suggests sun-ripened tomatoes from Italy, carefully prepared for classic pasta sauces and home cooking. But as investigations into the global tomato industry have shown, labels can sometimes tell only part of the story. Italy is one of the largest tomato processing countries in the world. Huge factories process millions of tons of tomatoes every year into sauces, pastes, and canned products exported across Europe. However, the country also imports large quantities of tomatoes and tomato concentrate from other regions to support this massive industry. In some cases, tomatoes or tomato paste grown outside Italy may be processed or packaged there before being exported under Italian branding. This doesn't automatically mean the labeling is inaccurate, but it does illustrate how complicated food sourcing can become when global supply chains are involved. The BBC Panorama investigation in December 2024 highlighted concerns that some tomato products marketed as Italian might contain tomatoes originating from other parts of the world, including regions where labor conditions have been widely criticized. Again, companies involved in the industry maintain that they enforce supplier standards and compliance checks. But the investigation revealed just how difficult it can be for consumers and sometimes even retailers to trace the full journey of tomatoes from farm to tin. For shoppers standing in a supermarket aisle, the label might say Italian, but the real path the tomatoes took before reaching that tin could be far more complex. And the next brands on our list bring us back to supermarket shelves, where two of the most widely sold tomato tins in the country continue to raise questions about what's really inside. Number 4, Aldi, Everyday Essentials, Chopped Tomatoes. At number 4, we move to one of the fastest growing supermarket chains in the United Kingdom, Aldi. Known for its ultra competitive pricing and streamlined product selection, Aldi has built a loyal following among shoppers looking for affordable groceries without too many brand name markups. One of its most commonly purchased items is the Everyday Essentials chopped tomatoes, a budget friendly staple that often costs significantly less than many competing brands. For families trying to keep food costs down, it's an easy choice. But as with many low-cost canned tomato products, the ingredient composition and sourcing raise some important questions. As mentioned earlier, UK regulations allow a product labeled chopped tomatoes to contain as little as 60% tomato. The remaining portion of the tin can legally include tomato juice, added acidity regulators, and stabilizing ingredients used to maintain consistency and shelf life. In lower-priced products, this balance can sometimes lean heavily toward the minimum tomato requirement allowed under the law. Another factor is the scale of the supply chain. Discount retailers like Aldi often rely on large volume suppliers capable of producing enormous quantities of canned goods at very low cost. This can involve tomatoes sourced from multiple agricultural regions and processed through several stages before packaging. The BBC Panorama investigation in December 2024 examined numerous tomato products sold across Europe and the United Kingdom while investigating global tomato supply chains. Their findings highlighted how difficult it can be to trace the full origin of tomatoes once they pass through international processing networks. Again, this does not automatically mean that all these products are sourced improperly. But the investigation reinforced a key point many consumers are only beginning to realize. The journey from tomato field to supermarket shelf is often far more complicated than the simple label on the tin suggests. And the final 3 products on our list bring us to brands that many shoppers believe represent higher quality, yet they are not completely free from the same industry concerns. Number 3, Sirio chopped tomatoes. At number 3, we arrive at a brand many people strongly associate with traditional Italian quality, Sirio. Founded in the 19th century, Sirio is one of the oldest and most recognizable tomato brands in Europe. The company has built its reputation around Italian-grown tomatoes and Mediterranean farming traditions. For many consumers, Sirio tins represent something more premium than supermarket own-brand options. The packaging often highlights Italian origin, suggesting tomatoes grown under the Mediterranean sun and processed for authentic flavor. But even within well-known brands, the modern tomato industry operates on a massive global scale. Italy is one of the world's largest processors of tomatoes, producing huge volumes of canned products every year. To support that demand, tomato supply chains can involve multiple agricultural regions and processing facilities. Large-scale production means tomatoes may move through several stages, harvesting, transport, processing, packaging, before reaching retail shelves across Europe. This complexity is part of what drew attention during the BBC Panorama investigation released in December 2024. Researchers examined numerous tomato products sold across several countries, investigating how global supply chains operate and whether tomatoes marketed as Italian could contain ingredients sourced from other regions. The report raised concerns about how difficult it can be to verify the complete origin of tomatoes once they enter large international processing networks. Companies involved in the industry have stated that they maintain supplier audits and compliance checks to ensure standards are met. But the investigation highlighted a challenge that applies to nearly every large food supply chain. Once ingredients move through multiple exporters, processors, and distributors, tracing their exact path can become extremely complicated. For shoppers, that means a label may describe where a product was packaged or processed, but not always the full journey of the ingredients themselves. And the final two products on our list continue to show how widespread these questions have become across the tinned tomato market. Number 2 and number 1, Muti and generic value tomato tins. We've reached the final two products on this list, and interestingly, they sit at opposite ends of the market. One is considered a premium Italian brand. The other represents the cheapest tins you can find on supermarket shelves. Let's start with number 2, Muti chopped tomatoes. Muti is widely respected in the food world. Founded in Italy in 1899, the company promotes a strong commitment to quality and Italian-grown tomatoes. Its products are often priced higher than many competitors, and the brand has built a loyal following among home cooks who want a richer tomato flavor. But even premium brands operate inside the same global tomato industry. Large-scale production, international trade, and complex supply networks still play a role in how tomatoes move from farms to factories and eventually into tins sold around the world. The BBC Panorama investigation in December 2024 examined dozens of tomato products sold across Europe and the United Kingdom while looking into the broader global tomato trade. The investigation highlighted how difficult it can be to fully trace the origin of tomatoes once they enter large international processing systems. Again, this does not mean Muti products are sourced improperly, but it reinforces a larger point. Even highly respected brands are part of a massive global industry where transparency can sometimes be difficult for consumers to evaluate. Now, let's talk about number 1, generic value tomato tins. These are the ultra-cheap tins often found on the bottom shelf in many supermarkets. They may carry simple labels like value chopped tomatoes or basic store-brand packaging with minimal information about sourcing. Because these products are designed to be sold at the lowest possible price, they are often produced using large bulk tomato supplies sourced from wherever costs are lowest. This can involve multiple international suppliers, processors, and packaging facilities. And in many cases, the packaging provides very little detail about where the tomatoes were grown. For shoppers trying to make informed choices, that lack of transparency can make it difficult to understand what exactly they are buying. Which brings us to the bigger takeaway from this entire list. Tinned tomatoes themselves are not inherently bad. They remain a convenient and widely used cooking ingredient. But the modern tomato industry is far more complex than most people realize. From global supply chains to packaging materials and ingredient regulations, there are many factors involved in what ends up inside that small metal tin. The good news is that awareness is growing. Consumers are asking more questions. Investigations are bringing greater attention to sourcing and labeling. And as that awareness spreads, companies across the food industry are facing increasing pressure to improve transparency. Because at the end of the day, shoppers deserve to know exactly what they're putting on their dinner table.